What do you say, everybody? Welcome to Crimson Tide Headlines with Clint Lamb in for Jay Barker. I'm Mick Gillispie. We're going to talk to you about everything Alabama as the Crimson Tide gets set for a big showdown with Texas A&M. Alabama back to number one in the country. But before we do that, let me remind you guys, as you hang out with us here on the BamaInsider YouTube channel, you made this channel. You made it what it is by liking, by subscribing, with all your thumbs up, and by hitting the bell. So we ask you to continue to do that. Share. Tell your other Alabama friends about it, or even if you're not a Bama fan and you love college football, you just want to talk a little college football, that's what we do every Tuesday and Thursday. We got a lot to talk about, but before we get there, let me remind you this as well, that we want you to sign up for BamaInsider.com. Bama on 3. It's hot. You get a full year for $10. You get $1 for 4 months. Give it a try. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe. I think you're going to love it. All the recruiting, all the team coverage with our man Clint. It's so much to talk about with this number one recruiting class and this number one team in the country. But first off, Clint, awesome to see you, man. Thanks for jumping on with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I had so much fun on Monday Night Quarterback. You made the offer, and how could I refuse, man?
We made an offer you couldn't refuse.
That's right. Just like the offer you just made everybody else. Everybody's getting offers they can't refuse, Mick.
That's what we're all about here on this channel, right? Well, great to see you. Jay is on assignment this week. So, Clint, you're definitely the first choice that we have. We love when you come on and hang out with us and talk Alabama, whether it be our show on Friday night, the Tailgate Show, Monday Night Quarterback, and then the other shows that you do throughout the week, Chris Daughtry behind the scenes. All right, let's talk Alabama right off the bat. I guess the huge news is obviously Bryce Young did not finish the game against Arkansas. Jalen Milroe came in, and Jalen Flash Milroe was like a superhero running the football. He got some help from Jahmyr Gibbs. So now we got to figure out who's going to be at quarterback. I don't think Saban's going to give us anything there. Your thoughts on the difference between Bryce Young, if we'll see him, and Jalen Milroe?
Well, the struggle for Texas A&M here is that they're two very different quarterbacks, right? They're both effective. I think Alabama could win with both of them. Obviously, Bryce is the better quarterback of the two, especially at this point in their careers. But I certainly think they could win football games with Jalen Milroe as well. But it's not just preparing for two different quarterbacks. It's preparing for two completely different game plans based off of who is in there at quarterback. And I think that's important to note as well. If it's Jalen Milroe, you're going to see a lot more zone reads. You're going to see a lot more read options. You're going to see design quarterback runs to get the football in his hands and allow him to make plays just like he did on Saturday. Bryce, on the other hand, a lot of his, playmaking ability is going to come from his arm, not because he can't make plays with his legs, but he kind of, really doesn't want to. So, it's two very different players. And as of right now, we have no clue which guy it's going to be. I think a lot of it's going to be dictated based off of how, Bryce Young continues to progress throughout the week as far as the soreness of his shoulder and how much he's able to throw the football and just how comfortable he is. What you wouldn't want to do is if, things are trending in the wrong direction for him, or at least from a, he's got a lot of soreness. He's very limited throughout the week. You build a game plan around him, and then, he ends up not being able to go, or you throwing him out there, early in the game and he's not able to be very effective. So you pull him for Jalen Milroe. Now you haven't done the exact same thing because you've prepared some more plays with Jalen Milroe in the event of an emergency like that. But I still think that it wouldn't be doing Jalen Milroe any favors, considering, there would be at least part of the game plan that was built around Bryce Young. So I think, Alabama's got some figuring out to do, but Texas A&M, this is way more of a challenge for them because they have no idea what to expect. Because even though they saw Jalen Milroe against Arkansas, they saw Jalen Milroe executing a game plan that was built around Bryce Young. So that'll be interesting to watch as the week progresses and, come Saturday.
Love you guys in the comments section. Alabama Tide, Brock, all you guys, Robert, that are hanging out with us, man. Keep shooting them. Jeff, good to see you as well. As we kind of talk about this Alabama and Texas A&M game, and you almost have to talk about Arkansas just because of the difference that we saw in these two different teams. I thought Alabama with Jalen Milroe looked like the old Alabama. I mean, the way that they were able to run the ball, I worry that maybe they'll be a little bit susceptible if obviously if defenses are able to keep Milroe in the pocket, right? and he's unable to run, and he's got to throw the football. Is he going to be able to throw it effectively enough to move the ball and score points? But what I saw last week with the run game and the way that the offensive line blocked, Clint, looked like an Alabama team that could beat anyone.
Right. And there's multiple ways to put strain on defenses. And when you've got a rushing or running quarterback, you now have multiple ways that you can attack them with your run game, right? So I think that's important. The fact that they put it on tape that the offensive line, when they need to, they can block efficiently and create openings and holes for the running backs to take advantage of. But also you bring that element with a Jalen Milroe. That's going to put strain on the defense and make them account for more players in the run game. And I think that that's really important. Now, granted, that Jalen Milroe, as far as being a passer, he is not Bryce Young. I don't think he's ever going to be Bryce Young. Bryce is such an efficient, effective passer. He's so accurate with the football. He reads defenses incredibly well. He knows pre and post snap, what he wants to do, where he wants to go with the football. I think to a certain degree, that's almost a hindrance at times because he has the ability and the freedom to create or change things at the line of scrimmage. And that allows Alabama to get deep into its play clock. I think a lot of that's Bill O'Brien, but some of it's Bryce Young as well. Just having that freedom and wanting to get into a play that he feels like is going to be successful. And you see Alabama's offense be successful when he does that most of the time. But yeah, two very different players, two very different skill sets. And I think that, it's like I said before, I think they can win with either one of them.
Alabama and Texas A&M this week, and that's a 7:00 game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. What are your biggest fears without Bryce Young at quarterback for Alabama?
Well, I think the biggest concern is stopping the run. I think Texas A&M has the ability to stop the run. They have the guys who should be able to stop it. The problem is that they haven't really. Teams have had success running the football against this Texas A&M defense, and so it just, you start to wonder, when is it all going to click? And what has happened? Texas A&M has lost to App State. They've lost to Mississippi State. What did they do last year? A lot of people felt like that they put all of their eggs in that Alabama basket, and they spent so much time focusing on that game plan and getting that upset that it kind of cost them a couple of games prior to. Is that the case again this year? Can Jimbo Fisher save face as far as this season is concerned if he can beat Alabama not just one time, but 2 times in a row and going on the road to do it? I think that will be very interesting to monitor. If they're able to stop the run, you put the game on, Jalen Milroe's shoulders and his arm. And I do think he's got a good arm. I think he's got the arm talent that he needs. I do think he does throw the football a lot more accurately than maybe given credit for. People will look at that 4 of 9 passing against Arkansas, and they'll say, he's not a very accurate quarterback. There were some throws that were on the money that weren't caught. I think his completion percentage should have been a lot better than that. But at the same time, he's going to make some, young quarterback mistakes. And so you never want to be in a situation where that happens. But I think the main concern for Alabama is just not treating this game like you did last year. Just because they've lost a couple of games, just because they're unranked, that doesn't mean that you need to take them lightly and look ahead to Tennessee. In fact, I think it's a little bit of, some payback time for Alabama. And especially with what happened with Jimbo Fisher and, all the talk in the offseason, I think that you do get a very focused Alabama, not only team, but defense. And I think that bodes well for them on Saturday.
Oh, you're leading me to our next topic. But before I get there, let me ask all of you guys that are hanging out to hit us up in the comments section. We will answer a couple of your questions or talk about some of your comments at the end of the show like we do every Tuesday and Thursday. Also, like and subscribe to the BamaInsider YouTube channel. We love you guys being here for this, so continue to do it. Subscribe, share with your friends, hit the thumbs up. That's a way of saying roll tide, and hit the bell so you know when we're live, because you're not going to want to miss these shows as we march forward towards Alabama and Texas A&M, then Alabama and Tennessee. This is the toughest schedule I can remember Alabama having, just because of all the games being on the road. And so far, Alabama 5-0. They look like the number 1 team in the country. We'll talk about that a little bit later, where they're ranked right now. Because, look, this team is starting to figure it out. Nick Saban, one of the best of all time, not at just recruiting, not at just winning championships, but developing talent. And we're starting to see that now as Alabama takes one step at a time, part of the process. And they took care of Arkansas. This week is Texas A&M. All right, this week is also Jimbo Fisher. And Jimbo made a lot of comments in the offseason that were really personal attacks against Nick Saban. He called him a narcissist. He implied that Nick Saban cheated, that no coaches want to coach for him. He's tried to kind of back off of that a little bit here this week. Nick Saban versus Jimbo Fisher. First, let's just talk about the mentality that each guy has. Nick Saban apologized for kind of, pointing out that Texas A&M was taking advantage of the NIL. He never said they cheated. He just said that, this is kind of where it is right now. And then I just talked about what Jimbo said. Do you think, give me the mindset that you feel like both guys has. I mean, just in your opinion about each other.
I think that Nick Saban, we've always talked about revenge games in Alabama and how well they've done in a lot of those. In a lot of ways, I don't feel like that's the way that Nick Saban necessarily approaches it. I don't think he wants to get too emotionally attached to any one football game. I don't think he wants to, worry about, hey, we need to win this game by more because, I'm offended by what Jimbo Fisher said, during the offseason. I think that's more of a player motivator than a coach motivator. So I think for the Will Andersons of the world, he's been asked multiple times throughout the offseason about that. And all he's telling people is, we'll find out come, that week or that game. And I do think that against this Texas A&M offense that's been so limited, it's very difficult to imagine a scenario other than, Jimbo Fisher and that coaching staff putting together, a game plan and that they've been putting together for, multiple weeks that's able to throw the kitchen sink at Alabama and have some success that way. But if they continue to play offense the way that they've been playing through the first, 4 or 5 weeks of the season, I don't see them having a lot of success offensively. Their offensive line, has been okay, but I think that it's susceptible to give up pressure, and the quarterback play hadn't been dynamic. I think you need good quarterback play to beat Alabama. I just think that right now all the pressure is on Jimbo Fisher. And I mean, we've heard Nick Saban. Has he come out and said, I'm sorry for saying that? Maybe he did, but I didn't necessarily, I don't recall hearing I'm sorry in there. But at the very least, you did hear him come out multiple times say, I should have never said that. Have we heard that from Jimbo Fisher? Has he come out and said, I shouldn't have said some of the things that I said? Because I don't recall a time that he has.
I don't remember that either.
So, I just find that interesting because one of them, they were attacking how they were approaching running their program while also admitting that it was legal in the way that they're doing it. The other one attacked the person's character and who they are as a person. And so I think one deserved an apology a lot more than the other. But, I just find that interesting. And I do think that, these Alabama players and this team has Nick Saban's back, and I think you're going to see that on Saturday.
Yeah, look, I guess I feel like Jimbo Fisher is backing himself in a corner, but because he has such a big buyout, did I hear that it's $80 million? I mean, it's something ridiculous, right?
You can, if someone would owe me $80 million to not work, I'd have a hard time not figuring out a way to get fired because that's pretty solid. Right. I don't quite the buyout, my buyout isn't quite that high.
No. And I feel like where this program is, if they had any kind of reasonable buyout, the guy would have been fired already, right? He's 5 years in. They have invested all of this money into the program. They're not elite. They got blown out by by Mississippi State, which I don't think is a very good team. I think they're okay. They lost to Appy State. I know they're not a very good team. They're just okay. And they're going to get destroyed by Alabama this week. They put themselves squarely in Alabama's radar. And let me tell you something, when that happens over the course of time, it's $90 million the buyout. Okay, so it's crazy. They're stuck with him and is losing. And then you see him in these press conferences and he looks totally unhinged. I didn't find anything wrong with what Nick Saban said. He apologized, but I didn't think he had to. I didn't ever look at Texas A&M and think that they were cheating. I looked at them and said, hey, they're ahead of the game right now because they have the money to be ahead of the game, which was the point that Nick Saban was making. But I think we're going to find out, Clint, if Nick Saban is really angry at Jimbo or if he's okay with it. We found out that he wasn't real fond of Jim Harbaugh when they played Michigan in the bowl game. Do you remember that? I think it was B-Rob that went in late when normally Alabama would take a knee. I got a feeling that if Alabama and Nick Saban aren't happy with Texas A&M, we're going to know third, fourth quarter in this game. I just don't see Texas A&M being able to keep it close. And Alabama and Nick Saban, he's been just so respectable to the other coaches as far as trying not to run up the score. We'll find out this week. And he might not care. Maybe just rolls off of his back. But if it was me, I wouldn't be too happy with that guy.
Well, yeah, and that's where I think you do start to see maybe some of the emotion crawl in. Like once Alabama's taken hold of a football game, and he's very much, they're cruising to a victory. He starts kind of pulling back a little bit. Then maybe the emotions start to creep in. He's like, you know what? Let me throw Brian Robinson out here and score another touchdown. That's certainly something that can.
Do you remember
happen.
that?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
as soon as you brought it up, very much a Nick Saban thing to do in that moment when he isn't happy with somebody or doesn't like somebody. But I could certainly see something like that playing out that way. Once Alabama's got the game in hand, if they have the game in hand, you still got to play it. And really Alabama at that point, they're tinkering with things. They're figuring out, okay, what are some things we need to work on? Who are some guys that need to get some reps? He might decide instead, hey, you know what? We're not, calling the dogs off. If Bryce Young does play and Alabama's cruising to a victory, you might see him get pulled, maybe a little bit early to get Jalen Milroe a lot more work. But you might see him come in and have one of those two Tagovailoa, during his freshman year type of games where even though he would be inserted into the lineup for Jalen Hurts late in games, Alabama wasn't turning around and handing off the football, 20 times to try to run the clock out. They were wanting to see, Bryce Young operate the offense, sling the football around, get him as comfortable as possible, because I do feel like at some point they knew it was a strong possibility that they might have to turn to him. So they wanted him to not only be out there and getting game reps, they wanted him to get valuable game reps. So I think with Jalen Milroe, if he has to come late into the game because Alabama, things have gotten out of hand, then I could certainly see them continuing to operate the offense as they would. And maybe that adds a few more touchdowns or a couple of more touchdowns there at the end of the game. But it's just funny because Jimbo, he is, he's in year 5. He hadn't had, anything that will, does he have an SEC West title? Does he have a playoff appearance? No. And he's an offensive minded guy. Like imagine Nick Saban, who's a defensive minded guy who, Alabama's defense struggles year in and year out. I mean, that's not something that we can fathom. If you're as a coach as good as Nick Saban and you're a defensive minded guy, your defenses are going to be good. We have not seen innovative, strong offensive performances from Texas A&M under Jimbo Fisher. And I think that's what crawls Texas A&M people a lot more than probably anything else.
Yeah. And you said something that I've kind of got to double back to. You said if Bryce Young's playing and you see a lot of Jalen Milroe, give me a percentage. What do you feel like the percentage we see the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback and then the percentage that we see Jalen Milroe at quarterback? Just in your estimation, what do you think?
Well, I do think it's based off game script and how things are playing out. I don't think that it'll be them playing a 2-quarterback system where the game's, still in doubt and they've got both guys that they're rotating in. I think if Bryce Young does suit up and play, he's going to play and he's going to be the guy. I just think that if the game is starting to get out of hand, maybe you see him get pulled a little bit earlier than he typically would, because not only do they want to make sure they don't re-aggravate that shoulder injury, but they also want to make sure that they're getting Jalen Milroe, who already had to step up once in a crucial situation against Arkansas on the road. They want to make sure that they're not just getting him typical game reps like they have been. They want him getting valuable game reps, allowing him to throw the football around a little bit or operate the offense as he would if he were asked to be the starter. And I think that's a very important distinction. So I could see it being if it plays out how I'm starting to think that it will, which would be, an Alabama blowout. We'll have to wait and see, like I said. But if that ends up being the case, I can maybe seeing it be a 60-40, 55-45 split.
Wow. Okay. See, I don't think that Bryce Young's going to play at all.
And maybe
that's just that's just the way that I look at it. I mean, I saw Nick Saban in the press conference. He seemed a little irritated. Normally when he's irritated like that, there's a reason why. He doesn't have a very good poker face to me. When he doesn't like something, it's pretty obvious normally. And I feel like that's probably at the root of it. Also, the rivalry between he and Jimbo. This was a game that they lost last year. But we'll find out. I could be totally off base here. And it could be Bryce Young. Well,
what's interesting about it is the way that Alabama has always approached things. They want the players and stuff to approach every opponent the same, and it's a big reason. And this was a huge point of contention from Alabama fans a few years ago, was when Tua Tagovailoa, despite the fact that he was banged up, he played against the Citadel. And a lot of fans said, hey, you know what? This is Citadel. We're going to win this football game. Rest him. Give him an extra week of rest. There's no reason to play him. If you do that, if you're Nick Saban, one of the core pillars that you've built this program on is treating every opponent the same. You are sending a message to your team The Citadel, if this was LSU, Bryce would be out there playing this week, but it's not. It's the Citadel. It's a different opponent. It's a lesser opponent. So you know what? We're going to go ahead and sit him. That's not the way that Nick Saban operates, and that's not the way he wants his players or anybody within the program to think. So if it was going to be LSU, if this was going to be Tennessee this week in Neyland Stadium, if that was this week and you were going to play Bryce Young against them, even though you think you've got this game in hand against A&M, you've got to still put Bryce Young out there. Otherwise, you're sending the message to the team, we don't feel like Texas A&M is an opponent that you need to be taking as seriously as another opponent like Tennessee. So I understand that fans want to rest him, but you got to understand if he's ready to go and he would play in other situations or against other opponents, you're probably going to see him at least to some degree, on Saturday.
Good point there, Clint Lamb. That's why he's one of the best in the business, covering the Crimson Tide on a daily basis for BamaInsider.com. You can check out his work, BamaInsider.com. You can get it right now, part of the On3 network. Look at my hat. I have the hat to prove it. On3, Bama On3. You can get it right now, a year for $10. Try it out. If you don't like it, unsubscribe. You're not going to want to, though. You got Clint. You got all the great recruiting coverage with Andrew Bone, Joseph Hastings. You got Jimmy Stein on the message board with Clint banging it on there. And it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and better and better. More surprises yet to come. This is the New World Order. And I don't mean New World Order in politics. I mean New World Order as in Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and Buff Bagwell and all those guys. New World Order of wrestling. This is the New World Order of team coverage, and we want you guys to be a part of it. Thank you as you hit us up in the comments section. Southern Gal from Florida, Roll Tide to you. All of you guys. We're going to get to those comments at the end of the show, but like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up as you hang out with us here on a Tuesday talking Alabama as they move forward towards Texas A&M. Hit the thumbs up. That's a way of saying Roll Tide, and hit the bell so you know when we go live. All right. Alabama back to number one again, Clint. I don't know why they ever were taken out of number one. They won a great football game at Texas. Maybe it wasn't as dominant as people might have liked, but it was a good Texas team that was healthy at the time. Georgia took over the number one spot. They have looked really mediocre their last two games against Kent State and then against Missouri, who could have beaten them. Bama's back to number one.
Yeah, I do respect the voters for being consistent, right? I mean, if you're going to hold it against Alabama that they went on the road against a much better opponent than Missouri, by the way, Texas, they might not be top 25, but they're a pretty good team. And especially with Quinn Ewers, and especially, when they were fully healthy, like you said, much better team and much more of a threat, especially offensively, than a Missouri style, team. But if you're going to hold that against Alabama going on the road in that environment, and struggling, especially when it was in a time frame, which was, that early period that Alabama's really not used to playing quality opponents in, then you've got to do the same thing when Georgia goes on the road and struggles against Missouri. So I do respect the fact that they moved Alabama back to number one. I think if you were to ask Nick Saban or even a lot of fans, they love the fact that Alabama's back at number one. It's always good to be number one. But, I mean, I think that they like the edge that Alabama plays with when they're not the number one team in the country. So I think that if you're Nick Saban in Alabama, you're kind of trying to combat or overcome a little bit more of the rat poison that comes along with being number one, and especially the fact that even though you did struggle during that third quarter against Arkansas, you were dominant at various points in that football game, and you showed everybody that you're one of, if not the best team in the country. A lot more people are going to start singing your praises. Based off of what happened against Arkansas last week, everybody's looking at Texas A&M this week. And they're saying Alabama's going to completely slaughter them. It's what was the line? I think it's 23 or 24 points. If I'm not mistaken, it might not be that now that I think about it. I haven't checked it in a while, but if it's that high, I mean, a lot of people are going to still be picking Alabama.
Yeah, let me look it up because you kind of got me curious here. I know it's at least 20 right now. And we'll see where it's kind of gotten betted up to or down to. But right now, there's not a lot of money going towards Texas A&M in this game against Alabama.
Well, Mick,
24. It is 24. So it's been going up. People are just expecting Alabama to take Texas A&M behind the woodshed.
Well, I mean, in last week's game against Arkansas, despite the fact that, a lot of people were saying that they felt like Arkansas might upset Alabama or that they felt like it was going to be a close game because Alabama had struggled on the road. And there was just so many people that were picking Arkansas, and then a lot of the money, if you look, was being put on Arkansas, and yet the line wasn't really moving that much and never really got below 17 points. In those instances, that kind of tells you, Vegas wants even money on both sides unless they know something that you don't. And even though a lot of people were putting money on Arkansas, it was clear that Vegas thought that there was something off with that. They wanted to, bet on the other side or take the other side, and Vegas won big because Alabama covered. So,
yeah.
It is interesting to follow these lines. A lot of people picking, Alabama. It's crawled up quite a bit this week, and I expect it will continue to go up. And it's just, Nick Saban's got to combat that. All right. I mean, it's a good Texas A&M team as far as talent is concerned. You never know. Zach Calzada last year played out of his mind. Was he the kind of quarterback that you thought going in was going to be able to do what he needed to do to beat Alabama? Probably not, but he played over his head because he was up for that game. You could get that again from a Max Johnson if he plays, or a Haynes King if you get that. It could end up being a really close contest. So Nick Saban knows that Alabama is going to get everybody's biggest game or best performance, and he wants to have his guys ready. And I think more people this week are singing Alabama's praises, and that's just, that's that much more difficult, to keep the team focused. So it's a little bit more of a challenge this week than maybe last week.
Look, I took Alabama last week. As everyone that watches knows, I gave up the 17 and 17 and a half on the different shows, and I'll tell you why. Arkansas struggled against Missouri State. Everybody kind of looked over that because Bobby Petrino's the head coach. But if they make 2 tackles, they're going to win that football game, right? Then they go into Texas A&M in that game, and they take the lead, and then all of a sudden the Aggies absolutely shut down their offense. And I knew Alabama's defense would be able to take care of business. And the other thing is that Alabama had been addressing the fact that they were going to go on the road, and they wanted to play 4 quarters and basically be ahead and dominate on the road. Nick Saban made that a point of emphasis going into the game. Normally when he does that, then things happen. I'm taking Bama in this game because, and giving up the 24, Clint, because these guys all heard what Jimbo Fisher said against Alabama. And Texas A&M's like, I got a boat. I like to get out in the bay. If something happens with the motor on the boat and I can't move, I'm stuck. You know what I mean? You can't oar that boat back in. It's too big, That's the problem Texas A&M has. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have their best wide receivers out. They ran their mouths. So now it's time to either cash that check or bounce the check on what your mouth wrote. And I think that every single person that's in that stadium that's wearing crimson is going to make as much noise as they ever have, just because they want to see blood in this game. And I think they're going to get it. I think Alabama's offense is too good, whether they have Bryce Young or Jalen Milroe. And what Nick Saban's done strategically, what I love, is the fact that I don't think Bryce Young's playing. I just don't, right? I just don't see it happening. I think it's going to be Jalen Milroe. But you know what? We're not going to know that until, 6:30 or 7 on Saturday night. He's not going to give us anything. And you're right. If the problem that they have is that Nick Saban, if you practice or if you're ready to play, whether it's Texas A&M or Acorn State or, basket weaving school, you're playing in that football game. You nailed it earlier. I just think it's going to be Milroe. And then all of a sudden now you're dealing with Alabama's running attack. They had so much trouble stopping Mississippi State. They're going into a hornet's nest this Saturday. So I'm taking Alabama. I'm giving up the 24. And I would not be surprised if Alabama's defense doesn't have the best game that they've had all year, even if Brian Branch is injured. And I guess that's kind of the last thing we'll talk about leading into this game before we wrap things up. Do we know anything more about Brian Branch, who's such an important part of that defense?
As of yesterday, Nick Saban said that Brian Branch was not going to practice yesterday, but they expected him back at practice today. So especially them still being very early in the week, that's a very encouraging sign. I would expect him to play on Saturday, and that's huge for the defense. But you're 100% correct, Mick. When you talk about that, with the fact that it's a late kickoff, I think that from a crowd, getting involved, that's the best time to do it. You got those lights going at Bryant-Denny Stadium. The crowd's going to be electric. I kind of think back to that Alabama LSU game where Leonard Fournette didn't have any success running the football. That crowd was electric. I certainly think that you're going to see something similar. And I do think it's going to be difficult. When you look at A&M's offense, tell me where the points are coming from. Tell me how they're going to put up 20 in this game, because I can't. You better, for Texas A&M's sake, they better hope they went ahead and started preparing 3 weeks ago. Because in my opinion, and if someone shows this to Nick Saban, I might get thrown out of the next media availability. But there's nothing on paper right now that's telling me that A&M is going to be able to keep this even remotely close. And we'll just kind of have to see how it plays out. It's going to be fun though, and I will say thank you, Jimbo Fisher, because regardless of X's and O's matchup and the fact that it's so heavy in Alabama's favor, the fact that he took some shots at everybody's coach that everybody loves around here. There's going to be, the crowd's going to be great. The players are going to be great. And it's going to make this a much more entertaining game than it might have been otherwise.
Let me say this, Clint. When Tua got hurt in the Texas A&M game, I went on the post-game show, and I felt like Alabama should have taken him out of the game. I thought that Alabama should have taken him out. He could hardly walk going into that game. Obviously, he had a great game until he hurt his hip. And I suggested that maybe Nick Saban had made a mistake. My aunt jumped on me so fast on my cell phone because you do not criticize Nick Saban. And I learned a valuable lesson. It's always the coordinator's fault. Nick Saban, you just don't mess with Nick. Everybody loves Nick. And I'll go back to what I've always said. If it's good enough for Nick, it's good enough for Mick, and I think that that's certainly going to be the case for these guys this week. They're going to be locked in on making Jimbo Fisher pay for running his mouth.
Hey, it's so funny because I just hope at some point in my life I get a fraction of that. We're just, no matter what I say, people, it's Team Clint. I want a Team Clint like Nick Saban's got Team Saban, and you know what? He's earned every bit of it. A lot of times when he speaks, people criticize and they attack him for it. And the man ends up being right 99% of the time. So it is funny because I feel like that was just about everybody's reaction. For everybody that maybe had something negative to say after that play, there was an Alabama fan, about 6 of them ready to counter and tell them that they're an idiot for even questioning Nick Saban on anything. So I just hope I get that kind of loyalty someday, and it must be pretty cool.
Yeah, Aunt Diane, she was really quick. She was quick to text me, make sure I heard it from her first. All right, let's get to some comments before we get out of here. First off, thank you guys. Juan from New Orleans, Roll Tide. Here's a good one from Brock. I'll let you kind of chew on this. Throw the top 25 back up again, Chris. He says Georgia shouldn't be number 2. I got to tell you, man, Ohio State and Michigan, both of those teams are starting to really creep up. I'm giving Michigan a lot of respect. I mean, I didn't think they were going to be anywhere remotely as good as they were last year, but they're right there again. Clemson has looked better and better. They had a nice win last week. Their win over Wake Forest 2 weeks ago looks like a really good win. And then how about USC out on the West Coast sneaking in there? And Oklahoma State, the way that they went and thumped Baylor, I got a lot of respect for the mullet and what his team's doing right now.
Yeah, and the Georgia shouldn't be number 2 thing. I think the only thing keeping them at number 2 right now is Oregon being number 12. And really, I don't think they should be. They should have lost to Washington State. I said after the Georgia loss, and really it was going into the season, I had my question marks about, Oregon. But really, it was after the way that they got beat by Georgia. Everybody talks about how impressive of a win that was. I mean, right now they're the number 12 team, ranked team in the country. For me, it felt very Alabama, Miami 2021, right? Where, Miami was a top 15 team going into the year. Everybody was singing their praises when Alabama beat them the way that they did in that opening game. It was a great victory. And then what happened from there? I think Miami ended up going like 7-5 or 8-4 last year. I'm not saying Oregon's going to lose 4 or 5 games necessarily, but I do think that they should already have 2 losses and be working on the 3rd and the 4th. And so I don't view them in the same way that a lot of other people do right now. I think they're limited in a lot of ways, both offensively and defensively. And so I don't look at that victory and say, okay, I think Georgia deserves a ton of credit. They played phenomenal football. Don't get me wrong. Against that opponent, you could not have asked anything more out of them. And it's still a good team. So the fact they were able to do that, you got to give them props. I'm not trying to take away too much from it. I just think that, a lot of people, especially, Brock probably, he would probably agree that Georgia in that win over Oregon might not be as impressive as other people, have suggested. But I completely agree. I mean, I've been impressed with Tennessee too, and we'll find out a lot more, here in a couple of weeks. But it's setting up well. Alabama has had I think it's going to be 6 straight opponents, if you include Arkansas, 6 straight opponents where they're either ranked in the top 25 right now or they're getting votes to be ranked in the top 25. Like Arkansas fell out, but they're still getting some votes. And so that's I mean, that's a tough schedule, and 4 out of those 6 games are on the road. So Alabama's no one's going to be questioning their schedule difficulty heading into the playoffs. I can assure you of that.
Jeffrey's giving us a roll tide from North Carolina, red wine out in Vegas, baby. Juan says natty. I agree with that. And the last thing we'll talk about is Brandon says anybody else kind of sad Tennessee is wearing the smoky gray uniforms this weekend instead of waiting one more week for us. And Clint, I will say this, love the smoky gray. Spend a lot of time in Knoxville. I think it's cool that they mix it up. But when Alabama plays Tennessee, I wish that both teams would wear their home jerseys, the crimson against the orange, old school style. I love it when these two teams go head to head. It's a uniform game for me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel the same. It's a traditional game. I love the gray uniforms. I know, Alabama fans, they probably hate everything about Tennessee. So I don't know how many Alabama fans on here would agree with that, but I think it's one of the better uniforms in college football, in my honest opinion. But I think that probably moving forward, it would be, I would suggest that teams don't try the whole, let's wear a specific kind of uniform, or maybe do something like a red out against Alabama. I don't feel like that exactly worked out for Arkansas. You had the blackout back in, what was it, 08 with Georgia. That didn't work out great. I probably would just keep it very traditional and basic against Alabama and not try to, create any sort of extra storylines in there, because it just doesn't really work out for teams when they try it. So, it's probably better that they aren't wearing the smoky gray jerseys.
They never want to wear them again.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. Again, like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, do the bell as well on the Bama Insider YouTube channel. Don't forget, BamaInsider.com on 3, $10 for 1 year, $1 for 4 months. Check it out. You get Recruiting with Andrew Bone, who's got a show on tonight, 8 o'clock right here on the YouTube channel. Get you updated on everything going into this weekend. And Alabama and Texas A&M head-to-head for more recruits. And we appreciate you guys being here with us as well. We'll do it again on Thursday. Big week, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. Chris Daughtry behind the screen and behind the scenes doing a great job for Clint. I'm Mick. Roll Tide.